All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending our town hall with Nikita and Mia Mason tonight. I do want to let you know that before we get started, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. We just want to make sure that everything stays on topic. So before we get to the introductions of our guests, I'd like to kind of start off with a focusing activity to get everybody's mind in the right frame. So I want to go ahead and start off by asking everybody, what is the difference between equity and equality? So you can go ahead and type your answers in the chat. What is the difference between equity and equality? And while we're waiting for those answers to come in, I'll go ahead and ask our guests if they can answer for us. Mia, did you want to start off?
Sure. So the difference between equality and equity is kind of simple. Equality means everybody kind of has the same rights and privileges, where equity makes sure that those who are in a bigger disadvantage get more of the benefits that they need in order to make sure that their rights and privileges are fully protected. This can come in as far as monetary funds, or basically making sure that they have easier access to complete the job that they may be assigned to so that they can be successfully employed or have better health care for whatever reason they're in a disadvantage, especially right now as our government is trying to take away our ACE. So that's my short and sweet little definition of equality and equity.
Absolutely. That was great, Mia. Nikita, I'll turn it over to you. What do you think is the difference between equity and equality?
Yeah, so for me, equality means everyone is given the same resources in order to succeed. But, most of the time that's not always the reality. Everyone, through their status in the country has, sort of different privileges over others. So equity means diverting personal resources towards those who need them specifically in order for them to live a better life and kind of for everyone to be actually equal.
Absolutely. We did get some answers from the audience. Ava said, equality is everyone having the same opportunities. Equity is providing people with the unique resources they need to get an equal place. Absolutely. I mean, I agree with all of those definitions. And with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to the main topics here. Nikita, did you want to go ahead and kick that off? Let me actually go ahead and introduce you first before we get into our main topics so that everyone knows who you are. So Nikita is actually the Maryland State Director of Generation Ratify, which is a youth-led movement that focuses on gender equality and ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment in the U.S. She's a high school junior from Montgomery County, Maryland, and is currently working within Generation Ratify to help elect pro-ERA and pro-gender equality candidates within the House and Senate for the upcoming election. Did you have anything that you wanted to add about what you guys are doing over there at Generation Ratify?
Yeah, so Generation Ratify, just kind of give a little brief background. We were founded in 2019, and we actually helped flip the Virginia State Assembly. Recently, this past year, Virginia became the last state needed to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment within their state. So that was really amazing for us as an organization, just because most of our founding members were centered in Virginia. So that was a really big win for us. This past year, we were also able to file an amicus brief for another case to the Court of Virginia State, just kind of putting in our definition of why, the Equal Rights Amendment applies to all people in the United States and why it's especially important for it to be ratified. Right now, especially now with the election, we're really focusing on getting pro-ERA and pro-gender equality candidates within the House and Senate for this next election, because we want the Equal Rights Amendment to be one of the main focuses of this new House and Senate, and we really want to make sure that that is passed for everyone to be equal and for the many benefits that it gives. And we know that the Equal Rights Amendment isn't our stopping point. After that, we plan on doing so many more things, but that's just kind of our main focus for now.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, the fact that you guys are, supporting candidates to actually get stuff done, getting that action aspect. I'll go ahead and introduce Mia, although I'm sure a lot of people already know who she is. So she's running as the congressional Democratic nominee in Maryland's 1st District. She is a 20-year veteran who served in the Army, Navy, and DC National Guard. She retired in 2018 and shifted her focus to advocacy and fighting to restore equity and equality within our communities. Mia, can you give us a little bit more background about more of your advocacy and work with the communities, especially LGBT community?
Sure. So we have a lot of discussions to talk about, especially when fighting for equality. I mean, showing up at protests is one thing, but basically, like what you said, making sure amicus briefs get filed. That's what we've been doing. I go to organizations and I volunteer my story. My story goes like this. I was working for the government. They found out who I was, what I was, and decided to call me certain names and all types of other wonderful things and put me in a hostile work environment. Sued, I won. And then the government decided that they would accept us. And then they decided via tweet to get rid of us. So after losing my job, my car, my home, my pension, my career, my health insurance, I had to fight back. So we sued the president. A lot of people did. And all of those briefs got pulled together and went to the Supreme Court. And just this June, we turned over and fought and won for equality for us all. Now it's time to make sure that happens in every state, because the law is there. We have other court issues that are coming up that want to allow discrimination, and we must fight for it. So if it's protections for healthcare in the LGBT community, it needs to be there. I can tell you that when I was 18, 20 years old and I went to the hospital, it was simple. Name, gender, address, group ad. Because Sarah's having too much fun. Excuse us for that. But the thing is that, it was simple information. By the time that I was in my 20s and 30s, that information changed. And now, even in the census, they want to know sexual orientation, your birth gender, your ethnicity, and everything else. So we need to understand by going to DC, advocating, why do you need this? What is it for? Are you going to try to use this to discriminate against us? And make sure that isn't used, especially when we are trying to get employed. Because I remember one of my employers decided to remove the entire EOCC regulation for sex, which means that they wanted to hire men. They didn't want to hire women. They didn't want anybody with any gender identity or sexual orientation at all. So our advocacy in DC was to make sure that the entire nation was equal. Now, because of what this administration has been doing since 2017 with its infamous bans on Muslims, immigration, nation of origin, sex, the basic foundation of marriage itself, and has been attacking people of color and can't even condemn white supremacy, we know that we have a legal battle. And it also deeply affects our LGBT community. So if it has to go all the way to the Supreme Court to protect us, we're going to be there. So when I've worked with organizations like MMAA, NCLR, NARLA, NCTE, HRC, it is about making sure that we pick up the phone, call the people that we need to support these organizations, because even with folks like Whitman Walker or Lamba Legal, they were there to help me. Let's give back and help our communities so that we don't end up as homeless veterans again in Ruby Casa or other places, to make sure that our community can succeed. Those are the things that we are fighting for. My personal story is long and arduous, but I wanted to make sure that after people got tweeted, that it affected tens of thousands of folks. And now, What President Trump is trying to do is affecting millions. He's failed in this pandemic, and now he's still trying to root for the LGBT community, and it's not working. We've wised up, and we're saying no to him.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, Mia. I think that, you are, like you said, one of many, and it affects so many people out there. And with that, I wanted to turn it over to Nikita to go ahead and introduce our main topics for tonight and talk a little bit more about the main focus of Generation Ratify.
Yeah, so our first major topic for tonight is gender equality and gender rights. And, that basically is kind of what Generation Ratify encompasses. As we advertise on our Instagram and on our website, we are always fighting to include those who are historically discluded from the U.S. Constitution, whether that be those who identify as women, those who identify as non-binary, our LGBTQ plus community, and obviously so many more people who don't have the same benefits as others. And our second major topic is the Equality Act. And that basically protects, this is a really major act, and it protects our LGBTQIA plus individuals from discrimination, especially dealing with healthcare within the United States. And yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, we did recently have a win in the Supreme Court, again, with discrimination against sex and sexual orientation in the workplace, which is amazing. I wanted to go ahead and turn it over to Mia because I know, Mia, that your opponent, Andy Harris, actually voted against the Equality Act. So if you could go ahead and talk a little bit more about why you support the Equality Act, that would be great.
I wholeheartedly support the Equality Act because basically it's an enforcement of the Civil Rights Act. Okay, it allows us to put it in the Constitution, right in line with the 15th through the 19th Amendment, to provide that equity and equality. This is why I say we must restore equity and equality, because every court case that's been in the lower courts and the appellate courts and the district courts, the federal courts, and all the way to the Supreme Court have been attacking the Civil Rights Act since this administration took office. We've been nonstop fighting this. And we're going to continue fighting it because those 182 folks who decided to vote against it in their districts, in their counties, in their states, they don't want equality. They want to be allowed to discriminate on terms of religious freedom, or they want to discriminate on race or nation of origin. They even want to go as far as basically saying, oh, based on your DNA, we're going to charge you more rent, more percentage, maybe not even hire you or provide you your health insurance based on your DNA. We must be able to make sure that the ERA is passed by the Senate and signed by our future president, Joe Biden.
I like that. That's absolutely right, Mia. Just reminding everybody with that, make sure that you are registered to vote, that you request your ballot, or you vote early in person or at the polls, but just make sure that you get out there and vote. We did have a question come in from the audience, from Catherine. What are your thoughts on free/extremely reduced prices for menstrual products? I'll go ahead and ask Nikita that first.
Yeah, so that's a great question. In terms of my personal opinions, I support that wholeheartedly. Actually, Generation Ratify, we have reduced our focus to two different pieces of legislation within the House this year, and we recently were able to lobby for them as well. And that one of those was the Menstrual Equity Act of 2019, I believe, and basically that provides that communities where there are a lot of low-income individuals will have a better access to those menstrual hygiene products that they need, And we're doing this, like all of our efforts are with the support of other youth-led menstrual justice movements around the country as well. So that is going to be one of our huge pushes this year, especially when it comes closer to after the election and our new Congress is sitting. We really want to be able to fight for this basic human right.
You're right. And I think that you made a really good point in saying that, these gender inequalities that exist really do sometimes, most of the time, affect a lot of people of color more disproportionately. Mia, I wanted to go ahead and turn it over to you to ask how you feel about free and extremely reduced prices for menstrual products.
I think it would be a blessing, because also what happens to any type of product for a woman, we get a pink tax, which means that if it's pink, purple, teal, sky blue, it is going to be taxed because it is a product for a female. So making sure that those costs go down is super important. And I have to say that even for those women who have done crime and are in a place like prison or jail, in order to get menstrual products, you have to pay double or triple the price of what it takes to buy a whole package of menstrual products. So we are always at a disadvantage because we are simply women. And I know that our opponent wants women to pay more for everything. So we need to make sure that gets changed by getting me elected to office so that we can fight for these bills that Nikita has talked about, so that we can make sure that this is at a better price or basically a free service.
I agree, Mia, and I think you also pointed out a very important point that, women in prisons really also face those inequities as well. It looks like we have another question from the audience, and I think I really am going to like your answers for this one. It comes from Grace. What are your thoughts on the position, on the possible appointment of Amy Coney Barrett? Considering she has close ties to focus on family as well as other hyper-conservative groups, what threat does she pose to gender equality and the protection of the LGBTQ plus community, and how can we fight back?
So I'll start out with this one, okay? So if she gets elected, she can overturn Roe versus Wade, okay? She can also state what the president has stated, that basically a decision for like marriage or benefits is strictly between a man and a woman. And that's not true, because even for our non-binary community, they should have the right to get married. They should have the right to be employed. They should have the right to the health care. We need to be able to make sure that there are more benefits for everyone. I see some chats coming in saying that there's only two genders. Well, you are absolutely wrong. There's more than what you think. You are only limited by what you know. So if you learn more, you can understand exactly what's going on. This is why it's so important to make sure that if Amy gets into this Supreme Court, that we get rid of her, Brett Kavanaugh, and more, because when it comes to our LGBTQI plus rights, it affects everything from the place where we are born to the zip code that we live in, for how much it may cost or where we live, the type of car, the type of job we have, the health care that we have. All of these things can be discriminated against us, and she will definitely be there in her religious opinion, remove it so that we don't have any rights. This is why we must oppose her, make sure that the court is still in favor of the majority, which is progressive and democratic.
Absolutely. Nikita, did you want to go ahead and answer?
Yeah, so basically, I think we all know the huge threat that, prefaces us if she gets appointed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will have almost a supermajority of conservative justices, which I don't think has happened in over 50 years. So it'll pose a really huge threat to civil rights, gender equality, our reproductive rights. There are so many countless things that a lot of Americans depend on things like, good health care, taxes. All these things could change if the Supreme Court gets that supermajority of conservative justices. And I think in terms of the second part of that question, how we can fight back, I think the most basic way to do this is kind of try and emailing your Congress members and the people in your Senate. Obviously, again, this varies between region, but we have a lot of very prominent Senate members whose minds can be changed, even some Republicans, on whether they are going to oppose or appoint her as a Supreme Court justice. And I think it's really important that, we all are using our voices to educate and also to act on this, because it's really going to be devastating if she does end up getting appointed. And the amount of things that, the Supreme Court has the ability to do that oftentimes we underestimate is extremely awful. So we really have to fight against that to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right. I personally think that, she would impose her religious beliefs and mix that church and state. She has said before that she is willing to weaken Roe v. Wade, even overturn it, and that would just be detrimental to women's rights everywhere. How can we fight back? Voting. We need to vote out people who are voting with President Trump in these awful decisions. And even if you can't vote in a state that, really is like a swing state, what you can do is make calls for that state, advocate for the candidates, help with fundraisers, get involved in their campaigns. And with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. Mia, you said that there might be a question from the stream.
Sure, there is. And it's about us naming all the genders that are out there. So let's go ahead and knock them out. You ready?
Go ahead and start us off.
Okay, so we'll start with the asexual, bisexual, lesbian, gay, transgender, which means also trans man and trans woman. And then, of course, we have the people that are binary. And, of course, you can also be, intersex as well? And then, lastly, male and female. What else could there be, Nikita?
You can also be ace-gender, so you don't identify with a single gender.
So,
gender fluidity.
There you go. This is why we have to make sure that we fight for equality and equity for everyone, regardless of how they identify, what their sexual orientation is, and make sure that you understand exactly what we're trying to understand, because you may have been taught something different and only believe in just two sexes. Well, you are completely wrong about it. It is time to move forward to our next question.
All right, and the next question comes from Catherine in the audience. How can we protect our rights to reproductive health if Amy is approved? I'm too young to vote and I've made calls. What else can I do? Very valid question. Nikita, I wanted to go ahead and toss that one over to you first.
Yeah, so just to kind of plug in some more of Generation Ratify's actions, on our website, if you go to generationratify.org/SCOTUS, we have a couple of different advocacy forms you can fill out, where if you just type in your name, your email, and your address, it sends automated emails to 15 key senators in the Senate, obviously, and it sends them automated emails. You can also go in and write a personal email to them within our automated email if you want to, but and you can do this as many times as you want. You can, do it 3 or 4 times a day if you want to. But yeah, it's a really great way to have, especially if you can't vote yet, it's a really easy action to do, and you can do it once a day. You can do it as many times as you want. Another thing I would suggest is, first of all, education is really important. I think a lot of people underestimate that as well, how many people can benefit from just kind of education in general about, what the stakes are in this Supreme Court nominee and what we are losing if she does get appointed. I think that is super important to inform like family and friends, especially when they're starting to get ready to vote.
You're right. I think education is so important. Not only that, but also voter education, help people vote. Mia, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Catherine, thank you for making sure that you can phone, bank, and text to our local community members to basically stand up and say no to Amy. I mean, honestly, if she gets in, we have a lot of work to do. Hopefully, if we're able to secure the Senate, that means that we're able to provide more judges to the Supreme Court so that we can make sure that other issues that maybe have an opinion on that protect our rights or basically help women in their choice to have birth, right, for Roe versus Wade, can be protected for everyone. I think that, we have many options. And you choosing to make phone calls for us is an amazing benefit because it really helps us. It shows us exactly why we are running for office and why we want to be able to stop bad appointments like this. So here we go. We have another question in from the stream, and let me get it for us so that we can discuss it. And I think it's just a simple question. Why have none of the other gender options for COVID-19 only reflect men and women? I think, honestly, to answer that question, it's just up to whatever the governor wanted to use in your area, and to get into the actual demographics of it. We want people to be able to complete their census, which actually has a broad reach and scope of all of those genders so that you can properly identify with yourself.
I'll tell you right now, I work in healthcare, and on our history sheets, our patient history sheets, they do not have any other really options, any of the ones that we talked about, at least tonight, on there for people to identify as. Nikita, did you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I don't really have much to add, but yeah, that's definitely what you said, Lauren, about how, a lot of people feel discluded from, answering those forms because they can't answer them truthfully. So I think that's another thing that we really need to work to provide inclusivity, especially in terms of like healthcare and stuff, to make sure that if you identify yourself as a certain way, it's important for, healthcare staff and, your doctors and your surgeons to know that and to make sure that that's included in your stuff.
You're right. And just a slight tangent, nursing programs nowadays do offer cultural diversity classes and also LGBTQ plus cultural classes to kind of help you tailor you to working with those populations, which is nice, but I mean, it should have been done a long time ago. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to some other questions. Let's see. How has COVID-19 impacted the LGBTQ community?
Well, I think that one of the hardest things that has affected us is basically if we had no place to go. Most of us were probably the first ones to lose our jobs, lose our health care, and like trying to get in to get seen or heard. They're often asking us additional questions or providing us special nurses to basically deal with us because we're, quote, we've answered the question that we are LGBTQ. So they feel that, we need special attention, and sometimes we don't. We see that as a form of discrimination. So that made us getting our health care a lot harder because we had to have a specialized nurse or somebody else tell us what the doctor is telling us. Okay?
Nikita, did you want to go ahead and answer kind of how COVID-19 has impacted the LGBTQ community?
Yeah, so I think just from what I've been hearing from a lot of my peers and friends is that especially a lot of young people who identify as LGBTQ plus, it's been hard because of quarantine and having to stay inside a house that you don't feel safe in, or the people around you don't necessarily respect the way you identify and your sexual orientation. So I think that has been super hard for a lot of people in terms of how they're identifying, and the fact that the people that they're forced to live with, especially those who are under 18, don't respect that, and they really don't have anywhere to go.
You're right, absolutely. Our next question is, what still needs to be done to establish equal gender rights? Mia, did you want to go ahead and start that off? I mean, considering if you were elected, you will be in Congress and you'll be the first openly transgender person in Congress. So will you go ahead and talk to us a little bit more about what you plan to do to kind of establish more equal gender rights?
I'll be working with the organization that we're talking to right now to make sure that our ERA definitely gets back from the Senate so that we can vote on it, all right, and get it to President Joe Biden so that we can have the equality that has been written in this amendment to be provided for everyone. You know, it's going to help reinforce our Civil Rights Act. That's what we're going to be able to do. We want to be able to get it done in our first 100 days. We have over 400 plus bills that are sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk, and a lot of them deal with equity and equality. Also with like police reform and other things. These are the top issues that we are facing here, along with getting our healthcare on track and provided to a lot more folks, because we know that President Trump has no plan and he's simply just trying to dismantle it for us all and make us pay more.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, you know, minority communities do pay more for healthcare and other things, unfortunately. Next, I wanted to transition into our next question, which is, why are you a strong advocate for the LGBTQ plus community? Nikita, you can start us off.
Yeah, so I believe if you're not a strong advocate, then what does that really say about you as a person? If you believe in equality, and I do, I believe in total equality. I think it's so important for everyone who identifies a certain way, whether that's your gender or your sexual orientation, to be valued within the government, within the healthcare system, within how you get your houses and how you're paying rent. I believe that it's so important to make sure that all of these basic human rights are guaranteed to anyone who wants them, regardless on how they identify. And I think, especially due to religion and due to the way that America has treated LGBTQ plus individuals, I think a lot of times we like to think that we are progressive in our policies, but really, gay marriage was only legal about, I would say, 6 years ago. So, there's still so much to be done for the LGBTQ plus community, especially people of color who identify as LGBTQ plus. There's so many inequalities that are still there and that are still present and will continue to be present, that we really need to address and fight against.
Yeah.
You're right. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into advocacy and how you got into Generation Ratify? I mean, you're so young, but you know so much. So can you go ahead and kind of give us a little bit of a brief story about that?
Yeah, so I think I was really young when Trump got elected to be the president. I believe I was in middle school, and I didn't really understand like the impacts of that. But I remember reading on the news somewhere that Trump was repealing all the Obama's administration's climate change efforts in order to decrease, the amount of CO2 in the air and all that stuff. And I remember feeling so angry and sad. And I remember, all these things that Trump was doing, all these things I, was exposed to them all the time. And especially, I used to live in Wisconsin. So especially when I moved to Maryland, I found a community that was very like-minded to me, who was very eager to, enact these and fight against change, even though we are young, and there's still so much that you can do regardless of what age you are, regardless of, where you are. So I think that's really how I got started. I got started on the county level. So currently I'm, doing a lot of voter registration efforts within my county to get 100% of our eligible seniors and high schoolers registered to vote. But that's kind of where I found Generation Ratify during quarantine, actually, and I was feeling very stuck, and I really, felt the need to change something, to do something. So that's kind of when I started getting more involved with Generation Ratify. And it's such a large community. There's so many different people from different places and backgrounds, and it's all these different young people fighting for the same things. So I think that's kind of what made me stay, because of the community, because of the people, and just because of our goal. It's so important, and the fact that the Equal Rights Amendment still hasn't been ratified in the United States, even though especially how far we've come as a country is so astounding to a lot of people. And yeah, that's just kind of how I've been trying to impact. Even with being young, I think it's still important, if you believe in something, to do something and to fight for it.
Wow. Well, I think that your story goes to show that, even if you can't vote, you still can make a change and make an impact. And, I am glad that you got into Generation Ratify, and thank you for everything that you're doing over there. We did have another question come in. How can we be a better ally to the LGBTQIA plus community? Mia, can you go ahead and start us off?
Yes, I think it's about the education, making sure that we provide that acceptance to them, because even if they're a part of the queer community and they don't identify, and they want to be able to also be gender fluid, it is about that education, so that we provide diversity training, so that we make sure that everybody on every level, regardless of where they came from in their history or where they grew up, like, what's going on in Louisiana, Alabama, and South Dakota, they decided to file a lawsuit against the ERA in order to make sure that it gets blocked from being ratified into the U.S. Constitution. So those states definitely have a lot to learn. I can't even believe that President Trump wanted to remove diversity training from our federal employers who've had it for a very long time, for like 15 plus years. And, I remember when Don't Ask, Don't Tell ended, and I was happy. When we got marriage equality, I was happy. Life was getting a lot better. And I'm disappointed. I'm disgusted at President Trump and others want to be able to take us back 50 years and remove everyone's civil rights so that they feel empowered. When you actually take a look at the entire world, China, India, they all outnumber us. Imagine if they decided to come into this country and boss you around and tell you what you need to do and took away your rights based on what you are trying to say. That we need to make sure that all of us, regardless of where they come from on this earth, is protected. So if you come to America and you want to be able to have an opportunity to succeed here, you should have that with the proper diversity and education provided to you.
You're right. I think that education is a huge aspect of becoming a better ally, kind of making yourself more aware of the situation, empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of other people in that community. Nikita, did you want to go ahead and respond as well?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that point on education and being able, and just to expand on that, education is super important, not just for yourself, but also for those around you. So if you see like your peers, or even sometimes even your teachers or your parents might do something that has transphobic or homophobic undertones to it, you want to make sure that even though it's hard to obviously stand up to those who are much older than you or whatever, it's important to also make others around you aware of what their actions are doing that are hurting an entire community. And also, while you're focusing on yourself, it's also important to, kind of look around you and see like, oh, there's a problem with the way that my teacher treats these couple students. Like I should, present yourself as an ally to them and kind of help them solve that. And if a situation ever comes up like that, it's always important to try and do the right thing instead of being silent.
You're right. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up tonight. Mia, did you want to go ahead and have any closing comments?
Sure. So we've discussed a lot about, how we are going to be able to protect the ERA and get it passed in the House and the Senate and signed by the future president. So we need to be able to understand how we can help win our election. Folks can do this by joining us at miadmason.us, follow us at Mia4MD on all of our social media platforms, and volunteer. It really helps out when you do. And of course, we want to be able to help your organization, Nikita. How do we help you, and where can we find your website and social media?
Yeah, so on Instagram, where we're most active, our handle is Generation Ratify, and we post a lot of different educational materials on there. And the specific Maryland chapter of Generation Ratify can be found at Generation Ratify MD. So if you want to get more involved on our Maryland actions, that would be great. We are also, if you're interested in organizing around the topic of the Supreme Court and the SCOTUS, we're currently holding many different action hours around the country. So currently Maryland is having an action hour on Saturday to call other Generation Ratify organizers and help them contact their senators, as well as call key senators yourselves. And we're having that on Saturday. And if you want to see more of our events and learn more about the amicus brief we filed, the different actions that you can take, the digital events that are around the country, you can go to generationratify.org, where we have a whole plethora of different ways that you can get involved with Generation Ratify in your community. And yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I did want to go ahead and thank everybody for coming out tonight. And everybody stay safe and make sure that you get out there and vote.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.